My name is Athena Warren. I'm 27 now, a designer living quietly in Nashville, Tennessee. But 5 years ago, when I was just 22, my life ended with one sentence. You're nothing but an ugly college dropout. Don't you dare show your face at this family again. Those were my mother's last words before the door slammed in my face. The sound still echoes in my memory. Sharp, final, like the crack of something breaking inside me. I stood there on the porch with a suitcase I could barely afford, staring at the house I once called home. Through the window, I saw my little sister Cassandra laughing beside our parents. They didn't even look back. The air was cold that night. Or maybe it was just me, frozen in disbelief. I kept waiting for someone to open the door, to say it was a mistake, that they didn't mean it. But no one came. The porch light flickered once, and went out. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, if your own family ever made you feel invisible, stay with me. Because this story isn't just about pain, it's about finding yourself again when no one believes in you. That's not just a line, it's a hand I'm reaching out to you. And if stories like this speak to your heart, hit subscribe and walk this road with me. Because sometimes, we only heal by walking together. I used to think love was unconditional, until I learned that in my family, love came with grades, beauty, and perfection. My parents were successful business owners, proud of appearances, terrified of failure. Cassandra, my sister, was the golden child, beautiful, smart, destined for medical school. I was the shadow beside her, the daughter who studied graphic design instead of law or finance, the one who saw art as a voice when words failed. To them, that was weakness. When my depression hit during college, they called it drama. When I cried, they called it failure. And when I finally dropped out to save my own sanity, they called it shame. That night, standing under the dim streetlight, I realized something I wasn't ready to say out loud. I had lost my family long before they threw me out. The only thing I had left was the faint belief that maybe someday I could build a life that didn't need their approval. I walked away with one suitcase, $52, and a trembling promise to myself, one day they'll see what they threw away. But for now, I had nowhere to go, only the long, dark road ahead and the echo of their laughter fading behind me. That was the night I stopped being an embarrassment to my family and began the slow, painful journey to becoming the woman I wanted to be. The first weeks after being thrown out blurred together like rain on glass, cold, shapeless, endless. I slept wherever I could, a classmate's couch, the back seat of an old car, sometimes the waiting room of an all-night laundromat, where the hum of machines felt like the only heartbeat near me. The world didn't end with thunder. It ended quietly. One unpaid bill, one missed meal, one ignored call at a time. I took whatever work I could find. Morning shifts at a diner, serving coffee to strangers who never looked up from their phones, evening hours, folding clothes in a discount store. And when everyone else slept, I cleaned offices, my reflection staring back at me in the glossy floors I polished for people who would never know my name. Every night, exhaustion sat beside me, like an unwanted friend. But loneliness crawled under my skin. Sometimes I'd pass a bakery and see families inside, laughing, arguing, simply being together, and I'd ache for something I couldn't name anymore. Home wasn't a place, it was a wound. I tried to call my mother once. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message I never should have. "Mom, I'm trying. Please just..." The line cut off. The next day, the number was disconnected. That was when I stopped begging, to be loved. Still, there was one thing they could never take from me, My love for creating. In the quietest hours, I'd sit in a public library, borrowing the Wi-Fi I couldn't afford, watching free tutorials about design and color theory. My old laptop would overheat every 15 minutes. But I'd keep going, sketching, learning, experimenting. It wasn't just work. It was survival. I remember one night when I almost gave up. I was sitting on a park bench wrapped in an old blanket, watching the city lights shimmer through my tears. A man passing by dropped $1 into my cup of cold coffee, thinking I was begging. That stung, more than hunger ever could. But then I heard my own voice whisper, maybe this is where it starts. Maybe rock bottom wasn't the end. Maybe it was the foundation. So I made a plan. Every tip, every spare dollar from waitressing, I saved. Every free moment, I practiced design. For myself, for friends, for small local shops that couldn't afford real agencies. I'd knock on doors with trembling hands, offering to design logos for $20. Some said yes, most said no, but each yes felt like a seed, breaking through concrete. Weeks turned to months. Slowly, a few business owners started calling back, saying they'd been recommended by someone else. I built a small online portfolio. I didn't even have Wi-Fi. I'd upload files from coffee shops, one cappuccino at a time. There were days I went to bed hungry because I chose to pay for internet instead of food. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt purpose. One evening, while cleaning an office building, I paused by a glass wall and saw my reflection. Tired, thinner, hair tied back with a rubber band. But there was something new in my eyes. Resolve I wasn't the same girl who begged for her mother's approval. I was building something from nothing, and it was mine. The janitor who worked the same shift, an older man named Harold, noticed the designs on my tablet one night. He whistled softly. "You made those?" "Yeah," I said, embarrassed. "It's just practice." "Doesn't look like practice to me," he smiled. "Looks like someone who's got more talent than luck." Keep at it. That tiny moment, a stranger's belief, stayed with me longer than all the cruelty my family ever gave. By the end of that year, I managed to rent a small room above a bakery. It smelled like bread every morning, and hope every night. I furnished it with 2 second-hand chairs, a mattress, and a desk I found on the curb. But to me, it was a palace, because it was mine. On the wall, I taped a single note written in marker. They said you were nothing. Prove them wrong, and every morning before work, I'd touch that note, like a prayer. That was the beginning of my rebirth, quiet, unseen, built from hunger and heartbreak. I didn't know it yet, but every sleepless night, every rejection, every tear, was chiseling me into someone my family would never recognize. The same girl they called nothing was slowly becoming everything they'd regret losing. By the time I turned 25, I had stopped counting the nights I'd gone to bed hungry. What I did count were my clients. 4 at first, then 12, then 32. Each one was a step away from who I used to be. My little studio apartment above the bakery had turned into a workshop, cluttered with sketches, color swatches, and old coffee cups. The hum of my laptop was my lullaby. The smell of fresh bread every morning reminded me that I was still here, still fighting. That's when I met Jordan Hayes, a quiet, sharp-minded man who ran a small marketing firm 2 floors below mine. We met because I kept using his Wi-Fi by accident, and instead of being angry, he came upstairs one day with a cup of coffee and said, "If you're stealing my internet, at least let me see what you're creating." I showed him my designs, nervous, expecting criticism. But Jordan just leaned back, studying the screen. "These aren't amateur," he said simply. "They're alive." That was the first time anyone had used that word about my work. Alive. He became my first real partner, not romantic, not savior, but the kind of person who believed in your worth before you learned to. Together, we registered a name, Athena Design Agency. It wasn't much at first, just the two of us sharing one printer, one dream, and a dozen unpaid invoices. But we were stubborn. Jordan handled business, I handled creation, and between us, we built something out of thin air. The first big client came by accident. A local cafe owner wanted a new logo but couldn't afford the fancy agencies. When I handed her the design, a golden hummingbird hovering over a coffee cup, she cried. "That's me," she said softly. "That's my dream." The next week, her friend called, then another. Referrals became the currency of my survival. Every time someone said, "Athena made this," my name, the one my parents had once cursed, gained new meaning. But success doesn't erase scars. Even as the business grew, I avoided family gatherings, blocked their numbers, deleted every old photo. Still, some nights, when I worked past midnight, I'd hear my mother's voice in my head. "Graphic design is for people who can't do real work." And I'd whisper back to the empty room, "Then I guess I'm as real as it gets." 2 years passed. We moved into a small downtown office, polished wood floors, soft white walls, and our company name stenciled proudly on the glass door. The first time I saw Athena Design Agency in gold letters, I had to look away before Jordan noticed the tears. "It's just paint," he teased. "No," I said quietly. "It's proof." By 27, we had 15 employees, a full client list, and projects with companies I'd once only admired from afar. People started calling me the comeback story, but they didn't know the truth, that every pixel, every deadline, every sleepless night was a conversation with the girl I used to be. Then one ordinary Thursday, while sorting through emails, I saw a name that made my stomach twist: Cassandra Bennett, my sister. The message wasn't from her directly, but from a mutual acquaintance. "You're invited to Dr. Cassandra Bennett's graduation celebration. The family's throwing a party at the Belmont Grand Hotel." For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. 5 years. 5 years since I'd heard her voice. 5 years since the door slammed shut. My first instinct was to delete it, but curiosity, or maybe something deeper, stopped me. Why would they invite me? Had they changed? Or was this another show of their perfection? Another picture-perfect night where my absence was easier to explain than my presence? I read the invitation again. Family and close friends only. The words tasted bitter. They hadn't called me family in half a decade. That night I sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer across the glass. Jordan noticed my silence. "You okay?" "Got an invitation," I said. "From my past." "You going?" "I don't know." He studied me carefully. "Athena, you don't owe them anything." "Maybe not," I said. "But I owe something to myself." For days I couldn't focus. Memories I'd buried deep began clawing back. The nights I cried behind closed doors, the laughter echoing from the dining room, the way Cassandra smirked when I packed my bags. But there was something else too. Pride. I wasn't that broken girl anymore. I wasn't the one begging for love. I was the woman who built a business from nothing. Maybe it was time they saw that, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that their rejection no longer defined me. So I decided to go. I bought a simple black dress, elegant but understated. I spent an hour doing my makeup, another hour convincing myself this wasn't about revenge, it was about closure. When I looked in the mirror before leaving, I barely recognized the woman staring back. There was strength in her jaw, steadiness in her eyes. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't see the girl my parents disowned. I saw the woman she became without them. As I turned off the light, I whispered softly to my reflection, "Let's go remind them who they lost." And with that, I stepped into the night. Not as a victim returning to her past, but as the architect of her own future. The Belmont Grand Hotel glittered like a palace that evening, chandeliers spilling light across marble floors, violins weaving through the hum of laughter and money, the kind of place my parents loved, elegant, loud, full of people who measured worth by the size of a diamond or a title on a business card. I stood at the entrance, clutching the invitation I'd printed from the email, feeling both out of place and strangely calm. 5 years had passed, but some wounds never scab over. They just learn to hide beneath polished skin. The doorman smiled politely as I walked in. My heels clicked softly against the marble, echoing like a reminder that I wasn't supposed to be there. Every table shimmered with white roses and crystal glasses. My parents' taste? Expensive? Cold? Perfect. Then I saw them. My father, tall and composed, laughing too loudly at someone's joke. My mother beside him, wrapped in silver silk, her smile sharp as glass. And at the center of it all, Cassandra, glowing in a white dress, her golden hair catching every light. She looked like the person they'd always wanted me to be, successful, adored, untouchable. For a long moment, I just watched. I thought I might feel envy, but instead I felt distance, like looking at strangers through museum glass. I made my way to the bar. "Red wine, please." My voice came out steadier than I expected. That's when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Athena? Is that really you?" I turned and found Professor Howard, my old college mentor, the one person who'd believed in me before I believed in myself. His eyes softened. "You look different. Stronger." 5 years can do that," I said, smiling faintly. He told me he now taught at the medical school, Cassandra's school. "She's brilliant, you know," he added kindly. "I'm sure she is," I said. My voice was calm, but inside, a storm was rising. We spoke for a few minutes, exchanging polite words. And when he walked away, I caught sight of my mother across the room. She was talking to a group of women, their laughter soft and poisonous. "We're so proud of Cassandra," she was saying. "She's always been so focused, unlike some people." The last words sliced through the air like a whisper only I could hear. I froze, but then my father joined her, glass raised, beaming. "We've been blessed with 2 wonderful daughters," he said smoothly. "Cassandra, the doctor, and Athena, who's running a successful design firm overseas." Overseas. My breath caught. They were lying, pretending, using my success as decoration for their perfect image, the same success they had once spat on. I stepped back into the shadows, my pulse hammering. They hadn't just erased me, they'd rewritten me. That's when I heard a voice near the terrace. Cassandra's. She was on the phone. Her back turned. I moved closer, my heels silent on the carpet. "I know, Mom. Don't worry, she's not here. She doesn't even know about the party." She paused, listening. "The lawyer said since she's been gone so long, we can claim she forfeited her trust fund. It'll take time, but it's doable." My body went cold. The trust fund, the one Grandma left for both of us before she died. I had never touched it, never even thought about it, but they had. "She made her choice," Cassandra continued. "She threw her life away. That money should go to someone who actually made the family proud." Her laughter, that same soft, triumphant sound I remembered from childhood, filled the hall like poison smoke. I raised my phone, hands trembling, and hit record. Every word, every lie, every plan to steal what wasn't theirs. When she hung up, I stepped back before she could see me, ducking into the nearest corridor. My heart raced, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was fury, a calm, cold fury that burned deep. They hadn't just disowned me. They were trying to erase me again, this time, legally. I walked out onto the terrace to breathe. The night air felt heavy, but it steadied me. From there, I could see the reflection of the ballroom in the glass. All those people celebrating a perfect family that didn't exist. Then a voice broke my thoughts. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" I turned. A woman in her 50s stood nearby, elegant, kind eyes, the kind of warmth my mother never had. "I'm Helen," she said, "your father's colleague." "You must be Athena," I froze. "How did you—" "Oh, your father talks about you all the time," she smiled. "He says you're too busy traveling for work to attend family events. He even showed me pictures of your projects. He's so proud." The lies were deeper than I thought. He'd taken credit for my work, for my pain, my struggle, my triumph. I smiled tightly. That's nice of him. Inside, I was shaking. They'd taken everything. My dignity, my story, and now my success. When Helen drifted away, I pulled out my phone again, whispering into the voice memo app. They're lying. They've been lying for years. They're planning to take the trust fund. I have the recording. The voice that came out wasn't angry. It was steady, almost detached, because in that moment, I knew what had to happen next. I wasn't here to beg for acceptance. I was here to reclaim my story and to end theirs. I slipped my phone into my clutch, straightened my dress, and took one last look at the ballroom. The chandeliers shimmered, the music swelled, laughter filled the air. They had no idea that beneath the glow of perfection, their empire of lies had just begun to crack, and I was going to be the one to make it crumble. My father's voice echoed through the ballroom, smooth and commanding as ever. "Family is everything," he declared from the stage, raising his glass. "My wife and I couldn't be prouder of our two daughters, Cassandra, our brilliant doctor, and Athena, our successful designer working overseas." The crowd applauded. I didn't. I stood near the back, clutching my phone, feeling the recorded conversation like a live wire in my hand. They were still lying, in front of everyone, turning me into a ghost who existed only to polish their image. When the applause faded, I stepped forward. My heels clicked against the floor, the sound slicing through the music. "That's interesting," I said calmly, "because the daughter you're so proud of isn't overseas. She's right here." Every head turned. The room fell silent. My mother's glass froze mid-air. Cassandra's face drained of color. "Hello, Mom." "Dad." "Cassandra," I continued, my voice steady. "Lovely party, though I notice I wasn't invited." Whispers rippled across the room. Cameras lifted. Phones began recording. My mother forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Athena, darling, this isn't the time or place." "Funny," I cut in, "because you seemed perfectly fine talking about me all evening, about my thriving business overseas, about how proud you are. Maybe we should keep it public, don't you think?" Her expression cracked. My father stepped down from the stage, lowering his voice like he still believed he could control me. "You're making a scene." "No," I said quietly but firmly. "I'm telling the truth." I held up my phone. "This," I said, tapping play, "is your other daughter, the one who called Mom earlier, discussing how you plan to steal my trust fund." Cassandra's recorded voice filled the hall. "She made her choice when she dropped out. That money's better off with someone who made you proud." Gasps spread through the crowd. "You recorded me?" Cassandra shouted, voice trembling. "I protected myself," I replied. "Something you and our parents never did." Professor Howard, standing near the front, stepped closer. "I taught Athena in college," he said clearly. "Her work was exceptional. What she's built, she built alone. And now it seems her family tried to erase her for their own gain. That's not family. That's betrayal." Dr. Gregory, the dean, joined in, his face grim. "I heard the same lies tonight, and I have to agree. This behavior is deeply disturbing." My father's voice broke for the first time. "Athena, please, we can talk about this privately." "Now you want privacy?" I said, shaking my head. "After 5 years of silence? After pretending I didn't exist?" The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that strips people bare. I turned to the guests. My parents disowned me when I needed help. Tonight, they pretended to love me for reputation and money. I'm done letting them write my story. Then I looked back at my mother. "You taught me love was conditional?" "Thank you. Because now, I know how to love myself unconditionally." And with that, I lowered my phone, nodded to Jordan, who had just appeared at the doorway, and walked out of that ballroom without looking back. Behind me, the perfect family portrait finally shattered. The next morning, the sun felt different. It wasn't brighter, just warmer, quieter, like the world had exhaled with me. For 5 years, I'd carried the weight of their rejection, the ache of not being enough. Now that weight was gone. My lawyer, Marcus, helped me finalize everything within a week. My parents signed over the trust fund and agreed to stay out of my life for good. Cassandra's apology came through a single text. "I'm sorry you heard it that way." I deleted it without replying. That night, I walked through my design agency, the office I built from nothing. My team was working late, laughing, dreaming, living, all under the name that once brought me shame. Athena Design Agency. My name, my work, my freedom. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, looking out over Nashville's lights. 5 years ago, I'd stared at these same streets from a park bench, wondering how I would survive. Now, I wasn't surviving. I was living. I had built something my family never could. Peace. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your story. And I did. Not in courtrooms or arguments, but in the quiet courage of showing up, again and again, until I became the woman I was meant to be. To anyone who's ever been cast aside, forgotten, or told you weren't enough, remember this: you don't need to prove your worth to those who couldn't see it. You only need to become the person you were always meant to be. Because sometimes, the family you deserve isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you build through kindness, courage, and truth. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not for numbers, but to remind someone out there that even from the deepest betrayal, you can rise, rebuild, and reclaim your light. My name is Athena Warren, and this is how I finally became free.